The great crystal dome of the Zephyrian Council chamber had never felt so cold. Ambassador Kethavar stood in the center of the room, his pale blue form trembling as he watched the massive display screen above. Red dots spread across the galactic, map like drops of blood and water. Each dot was a star system. Each dot was a dead world. 17 civilizations, whispered Counselor Murthon from her floating platform. Her voice carried the weight of billions of lost lives. The Vextar consumed them all in less than one solar cycle. Around the chamber, the other council members shifted nervously. Their translucent bodies flickered with fear colors that no Zephyrian had displayed for thousands of years. The Zephyrians were an ancient race, old when the galaxy was young. They had seen empires rise and fall, watched species bloom and die. But they had never seen anything like this. Elder Quindara floated near the great window that looked out into space. Her form was so old it barely held together, wisps of energy constantly breaking away from her edges. She had lived for over 10,000 years. She had seen the birth of stars and the death of worlds. But now she stared into the darkness with something she had never felt before: absolute terror. "Show them the Draknari footage," she said quietly. The screen changed. Now it showed a massive space station larger than most moons. The Draknari Fortress Prime had been considered impossible to destroy. Its shields could stop the blast from an exploding star. Its weapons could crack planets in half. 10 million Draknari warriors lived and trained within its walls. The recording showed the fortress on the first day of the Vextar attack. Hundreds of sleek alien ships surrounded it like insects around a light. The Draknari fought back with everything they had. Their massive cannons fired continuously. Their fighters swarmed out in clouds so thick they blocked the stars. For a moment, it looked like they might win. The Vextar ships were taking heavy damage. Several exploded in brilliant flashes of light. The Draknari commanders were probably feeling confident. They had the strongest military in the galaxy. They had never lost a battle. Then something changed. The Vextar ships began to adapt. Their hulls shifted and flowed like liquid metal. The Draknari weapons that had been tearing them apart moments before now bounced off harmlessly. Within hours, the Vextar had not only repaired their damage, but made themselves immune to every weapon the Draknari possessed. The recording showed the second day. The Vextar ships had grown larger, fed by the matter they consumed from destroyed Draknari vessels. They moved differently now, faster and more coordinated. They had learned from the battle and become something new, something deadlier. By the third day, Fortress Prime was gone. Not destroyed, not conquered. Gone. The Vextar had taken it apart piece by piece, consuming every scrap of metal, every drop of fuel, every living being. Where the greatest military installation in the galaxy had once stood, there was now only empty space and drifting dust. "The hegemony lasted 6 days, said Counselor Rathek, his voice barely above a whisper. 6 days, and they had the combined fleets of 40 worlds. Kethavar had seen those recordings too. The hegemony had tried a different approach. Instead of fighting from fixed positions like the Draknari, they had used hit-and-run tactics. Fast, ships, quick strikes, then retreat before the Vextar could adapt. It had worked for almost a week, but the Vextar learned from that too. By the 4th day, they were predicting the hegemony's attacks before they happened. By the 5th day, they had developed ships that were faster than anything the hegemony possessed. By the 6th day, it was over. "We tried diplomacy," continued Murthon. "We sent our best negotiators to establish contact. The Vextar didn't even acknowledge their presence. They simply consumed the diplomatic vessels along with everything else. We tried running," added another counselor. "The Kaleth packed up their entire civilization and fled to the galaxy's edge. The Vextar followed them. It made no difference. We tried hiding," said yet another. "The Morden moved their population to a dimension outside normal space. The Vextar found them anyway." Kethavar looked around the chamber at the faces of his people. These were the wisest beings in the galaxy, leaders who had guided the Zephyrian collective through countless crises over millennia. Now they sat in silence, out of ideas, out of hope. We have exhausted every conventional option, Elder Quindara said finally. Every alliance has crumbled. Every weapon has failed. Every strategy has been countered. The Vextar adapt to everything we throw at them. They learn from every mistake we make. They grow stronger with every victory. The chamber fell silent except for the soft humming of the environmental systems. Outside the great window, stars twinkled peacefully, unaware that death was spreading toward them at an unstoppable pace. There is one option, Quindara said slowly, that we have not considered. All eyes turned to her. The ancient elder's form flickered with colors that spoke of deep reluctance and desperate hope mixed together. The humans. The reaction was immediate. Several counselors made sounds of distress. Others began flickering with alarm colors. One junior member actually fell from his platform in shock. Elder, Murthon said carefully, surely you cannot be, serious. The humans are dangerous, Quindara finished. Yes, they are perhaps the most dangerous species in the galaxy, but not in the way the Vextar are dangerous. She moved slowly to the center of the chamber, her ancient form drawing all attention. The Vextar are dangerous because they are perfect. They adapt, they learn, they evolve. They represent the logical endpoint of technological advancement. They are what every species might become if they focused purely on survival and growth. But the humans, she paused. The humans are dangerous because they are imperfect. They are illogical. They do things that make no sense from any rational perspective. They refuse to accept defeat even when defeat is certain. They fight battles. They cannot win. They attempt solutions that should not work. Kethvar felt a chill run through his energy form. Every species in the galaxy knew about humans. They had been spacefaring for only 200 years, a blink of an eye in galactic terms. Their technology was primitive compared to most civilizations. Their lifespans were laughably short. By all rights, they should be a minor species. Barely. Worth noticing. Instead, they had become the subject of whispered stories told around council fires across the galaxy. Stories of impossible victories and refused surrenders. Stories of humans doing things that violated every principle of logical warfare and somehow succeeding anyway. They are called the Death Worlders, Quindara continued. Their planet should have killed them long before they developed intelligence. Instead, it made them strong, made them stubborn, made them refuse to quit no matter how hopeless the situation becomes. But Elder, protested Counselor Rathek, even if they agreed to help, what could they possibly do that we cannot? Their ships are crude. Their weapons are simple. They have no special technology that could stand against the Vextar. Quindara's form brightened slightly, the first sign of hope any of them had shown in weeks. That is exactly why they might succeed where we have failed. The Vextar adapt to logical responses. They learn from predictable strategies. They counter everything that makes sense. She turned to look directly at Kethvar. But what happens when they encounter something that makes no sense at all? What happens when they face an enemy that refuses to follow the rules of rational warfare? What happens when they meet a species that specializes in doing the impossible? The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then slowly, one by one, the council members began to nod. It was insane. It was desperate. It was their last hope. Ambassador Kethvar, Elder Quindara said formally, you will travel to the human homeworld. You will request an audience with their leaders, and you will ask them to do what no other species in the galaxy has been able to do. Kethvar straightened, his form solidifying with purpose. What exactly should I tell them, Elder? Quindara's ancient eyes fixed on his. Tell them that the galaxy is dying. Tell them that every logical solution has failed. And tell them that we need someone stupid enough to try the impossible. As Kethvar prepared to depart on the most important mission in galactic history, none of them knew that they were about to discover something that would change everything. Sometimes the best solution to an impossible problem is to find someone too stubborn to realize it's impossible. Captain Jake Morrison was having the best morning he'd had in months. The coffee was hot. The stars outside his observation window were particularly bright. And for once, The Earth Defense Station horizon was running smoothly. No equipment failures, no diplomatic incidents, no emergency alerts, just peaceful routine in the depths of space. That peace lasted exactly 47 more seconds. "Captain," Lieutenant Amy Chang called from the communications station, her voice tight with confusion. "We have an incoming vessel. It's not showing up on any of our identification systems." Jake set down his coffee and moved to the main display. What he saw made him stop in his tracks. The ship approaching their station was unlike anything in human records. It didn't look built so much as grown. Smooth curves flowed from one section to another without any visible seams or joints. The hull seemed to pulse with soft light that shifted between blue and green like ocean waves. "Sir, it's beautiful," whispered Ensign Paul Clark from the sensor station. "I've never seen anything like it." "Neither have I," Jake replied. In his 20 years of service, he had encountered vessels from dozens of alien species. The angular ships of the Karathi, the geometric patterns of the Veilton, the crystalline structures of the Melodians. But this was something entirely different. "Captain, incoming transmission," Amy reported. "They're broadcasting on standard frequencies, but the signal pattern is completely unique." "Put it through." The main screen flickered and then displayed something that made the entire bridge crew hold their breath. The being that appeared was made of pure light, constantly shifting and flowing like liquid starlight. When it spoke, its voice was like music, multiple tones weaving together in perfect harmony. "Greetings, humans of Earth. I am Ambassador Kethvar of the Zephyrian Collective. We come in peace, seeking an audience with your leadership regarding a matter of urgent importance to all life in this galaxy." Jake had been trained for first contact scenarios, but nothing had prepared him for this. The alien's words were perfect English, but the way it spoke suggested concepts and meanings far beyond simple translation. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Station Horizon. Ambassador, we welcome you to human space. What brings you to our system?" The light being flickered in what might have been hesitation. "The matter we must discuss is too sensitive for open transmission. We request permission to meet with your governing authorities on your homeworld." Within 6 hours, Ambassador Kethvar found himself in the most secure conference room in the United Nations building in New York. Across from him sat Secretary General Elena Rodriguez, a stern woman in her 50s who had built her career on handling impossible situations. Beside her was General Peter Knox, a military strategist whose gray hair and tired eyes spoke of too many wars and too many difficult decisions. "Ambassador," Elena began carefully, "we appreciate you coming to us directly. In our experience, when alien civilizations seek urgent meetings about galactic matters, the news is rarely good." Kethvar's form dimmed slightly. "Secretary General Rodriguez, I wish I could tell you otherwise. What I am about to show you represents the greatest threat our galaxy has ever faced." The room darkened, and holographic displays filled the air around them. General Knox leaned forward as images of star systems appeared, each one marked with timestamps showing recent dates. "These were the homeworlds of the Draknari Empire," Kethvar explained. Red indicators began flashing across the display. 3 days ago, they were thriving civilizations with billions of inhabitants. Today they are gone. "Gone?" Elena asked. "You mean conquered?" "No," Kethvar replied, his harmonic voice carrying notes of deep sadness. "Gone. Consumed. Every ship, every station, every living being. Even the planets themselves have been stripped down to bare rock." The display changed, showing new star systems. The hegemony of 40 worlds fell next. 6 days of resistance before complete annihilation. More systems appeared. The Kaleth Republic, the Mordun Collective, the crystal cities of Tethamar. 17 civilizations in less than one solar cycle. General Knox studied the tactical data flowing across the displays. "What are we looking at here, Ambassador? Some kind of natural disaster? A plague?" "We call them the Vextar," Kethvar said. "They appeared at the galactic rim 8 months ago. We believe they come from beyond our galaxy, though we cannot be certain. What we do know is that they cannot be stopped by any conventional means. New images appeared, showing dark ships with hull that seem to absorb light. They adapt to everything we use against them. Energy weapons, kinetic weapons, exotic matter bombs, dimensional warfare, temporal attacks. Nothing works more than once. They learn, they evolve, they become immune. Elena watched footage of massive battles, seeing alien fleets that dwarfed anything Earth could produce being systematically destroyed. What about evacuation? Surely some populations escaped. The Vextar do not simply destroy, Kethavar explained. They consume everything. Matter, energy, even information itself. They take apart their targets at the molecular level and incorporate the resources into their own fleet. Every victory makes them stronger. My God, Elena whispered. How fast? Are they moving? Current projections show them reaching the galactic core within 2 years. Your solar system would be consumed approximately 6 months after that. The room fell silent. General Knox was the first to speak. Ambassador, with all due respect, if civilizations far more advanced than ours couldn't stop these things, what makes you think we can help? This was the moment Kethavar had been dreading. He knew how this would sound to logical minds, but the elder's words echoed in his memory. Sometimes you need someone too stubborn to realize something is impossible. General Knox, Secretary General. Rodriguez, I must be completely honest with you about humanity's reputation in the galaxy. Elena raised an eyebrow. Our reputation? You are known, Kethavar said carefully, as the most dangerous species in the galaxy, not because of your technology, which is primitive by galactic standards, not because of your military might, which is small compared to the great empires. You are feared because you do not know when to quit. Knox almost smiled. Is that supposed to be an insult or a compliment? Neither. It is simply fact. In 200 years of contact with galactic civilization, humans have developed a reputation for achieving impossible victories through methods that make no logical sense. You fight battles you cannot win. You attempt solutions that should not work. And somehow you succeed. Kethavar's form brightened as he continued. The Battle of Proxima Station, where a single human destroyer held off a Karathi battle fleet by using a star's gravity well in ways that violated 3 laws of physics. The Veilton incident, where human negotiators ended a 1,000-year war by challenging both sides to a sporting competition. The rescue of Kepler's Hope, where human engineers fixed a failing life support system using duct tape and coffee filters. Those are just stories, Elena protested. Stories that every species in the galaxy knows by heart, Kethavar replied. Stories that have made human solutions a term used throughout known space to describe tactics that are completely illogical but somehow effective. General Knox leaned back in his chair. So you're asking for our help because we're too stupid to know when we're beaten? No, General. I am asking for your help because you are the only species in the galaxy that refuses to accept that some problems cannot be solved. The Vextar adapt to logical responses. They counter rational strategies. They have defeated every civilized approach to warfare. Kethavar's form pulsed with desperate hope. But what happens when they encounter something that is not logical? What happens when they face an enemy that does not follow the rules of civilized warfare? What happens when they meet humans? Elena and Knox exchanged glances. They had both read the classified reports about humanity's various encounters with alien civilizations. The ambassador was right. Humans had a talent for finding solutions that made experts shake their heads in disbelief. What exactly are you asking for? Elena said finally. Everything, Kethavar replied without hesitation. Your military forces, your strategic thinking, your engineers, your scientists. But most importantly, we need your uniquely human approach to impossible problems. Our approach? You see a wall that cannot be broken, and you try to break it anyway. You face an enemy that cannot be defeated and you attack. You encounter a puzzle that cannot be solved and you keep trying until you find an answer. That is not logical. That is not rational. That is human. Knox stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. Millions of people going about their daily lives unaware that their entire species might soon be called upon to save the galaxy. If we agree to help, he said slowly, and I'm not saying we will, what would we be getting into? A war unlike anything your species has ever faced, Kethvar admitted. An enemy that learns from every mistake, adapts to every tactic, grows stronger with every victory. The greatest military minds in the galaxy have tried and failed. The most advanced technologies have proven useless. Elena stood as well. But, you think we might succeed where they failed? Secretary General, I do not think you will succeed. Logic suggests that you will fail, just as everyone else has failed. But humans do not seem to care very much what logic suggests, and right now that may be exactly what the galaxy needs. 3 weeks after the meeting in New York, Admiral Lisa Carter stood on the bridge of the human flagship Liberty, watching the most unusual fleet ever assembled in galactic history. Around her ship, dozens of human vessels hung in space like a pack of metal wolves. They looked nothing like the sleek alien warships she had studied in the academy. Where alien ships were smooth and elegant, human ships were angular and brutal. Where alien technology was refined and perfect, human engineering was rough and practical. Admiral, called Commander Ryan Price from the tactical station, we're receiving the latest intelligence reports from Zephyrian scouts. The Vextar have just entered the Altair system. Lisa studied the holographic display showing the enemy's advance. Red markers crept steadily inward from the galactic rim, each one representing millions of dark ships. Every other species had tried to stop them using traditional fleet tactics, massive formations of warships meeting in open space. Technology. Against technology, the strongest shields against the most powerful weapons. Every other species had lost. Signal the fleet, Lisa ordered. All ships prepare for jump to coordinate 77 Alpha. We're going to show these aliens something they've never seen before. Lieutenant Sarah Kim looked up from her station with concern. Ma'am, those coordinates put us directly in the path of the Vextar main fleet. Intelligence reports over 2 million enemy vessels in that sector. I know exactly where those coordinates are, Lieutenant, Lisa replied with a smile that would have made her old academy instructors nervous. That's the point. The human fleet jumped to hyperspace, leaving behind the safety of Zephyrian space and heading directly toward the most dangerous enemy the galaxy had ever known. But they were not going to fight the way everyone expected. Captain Steve Williams received his orders while his ship, the Defiance, was still in hyperspace. When he read them, he had to check twice to make sure they were real. You want us to do what? He asked over the communication link. You heard correctly, Captain, Admiral Carter replied. Take your squadron directly into the corona of the Altair, Sun. Use the solar flares to mask your approach. Ma'am, with respect, that will fry every system on our ships. The radiation levels alone will kill us in minutes. Not if you do it right. Our engineers have been working on this for 3 weeks. You'll have approximately 7 minutes of operational time before your shields fail. Make them count. Steve looked at his crew. They were all staring at him with expressions that mixed excitement with terror. Flying into a star was not covered in any tactical manual ever written. It was insane. It was suicide. It was exactly the kind of thing humans were famous for. All right, people, Steve announced to his bridge crew. You heard the Admiral. Set course for the Sun, and somebody find me everything we know about solar radiation shielding. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Colonel Beth Turner was reading her own impossible orders. Her squadron was supposed to turn cargo haulers into weapons by loading them with asteroids and accelerating them to nearly the speed of light. The physics work, explained Dr. Carol Hayes over the communication link. Dr. Hayes was one of the civilian scientists who had volunteered for the mission. An asteroid moving at 90% light speed carries more kinetic energy than most antimatter bombs. The Vextar have adapted to every form of energy weapon we know about, but they've never faced anything like this. Because it's completely insane, Beth replied. We're talking about turning space rocks into planet killers. Exactly. The Vextar adapt to logical weapons. This is not logical. This is poetry. Beth shook her head. Only humans would call a relativistic, asteroid attack poetry. But as she looked at the sensor readings showing the approaching enemy fleet, She had to admit, it might just work. The strangest assignment went to Commander Nicole Foster. Her job was to broadcast music directly into Vextar communication channels. Music, she had asked when the orders came through. Not just any music, explained Captain Dan Roberts, who was coordinating the Psychological Warfare Division. Heavy metal, the loudest, most aggressive stuff we can find. The Vextar communicate through harmonic frequencies. They've never encountered anything like human music before. Sir, I'm not sure how Black Sabbath is going to help us win a space battle. Neither am I, Commander. That's what makes it perfect. The first engagement happened in the shadow of Altair's sun. The Vextar fleet detected the approaching human ships and moved to intercept, just as every tactical computer had predicted they would. What they did not predict was Steve Williams leading his squadron directly into the star's corona. The human ships vanished from all sensors as they plunged into the superheated plasma surrounding the star. For 10 minutes, there was no sign of them. The Vextar fleet moved closer, scanning for any trace of the enemy vessels. Then the solar flares hit. Steve had timed it perfectly. His ships rode the massive plasma eruptions out of the corona like surfers on a wave of pure energy. The radiation that should have killed them instead masked their energy signatures completely. By the time the Vextar detected them, the human squadron was already among their ships firing at point-blank range. But that was just the beginning. As the Vextar fleet moved to adapt to this new tactic, Beth Turner's asteroids arrived. Chunks of rock moving at impossible speeds tore through enemy formations like bullets through paper. The Vextar tried to adapt their shields, but there was no adapting to pure kinetic energy delivered at relativistic speeds. The confusion got worse when Nicole Foster began her broadcast. Heavy metal music flooded the Vextar communication networks. Songs about rebellion, war, and refusing to surrender. The harmonic patterns that the aliens used for coordination were completely disrupted by sounds they had never imagined could exist. "This is impossible," transmitted the Vextar Queen Mind to her subordinates. "Their tactics make no strategic sense. They should have been destroyed by the star's radiation. These kinetic weapons should not be effective against our adaptive hulls. And what is this auditory assault they are broadcasting?" But the humans were just getting started. "Commander, Carl Brooks had programmed his squadron's movement patterns using dice and random number generators. Every few seconds, his ships would change course for no reason at all. The Vextar, who had adapted to counter every logical flight pattern ever used, had no idea how to respond to ships that moved completely randomly. Captain Maria Santos took her destroyer directly into a Vextar formation and activated her ship's self-destruct sequence. But instead of destroying her own vessel, she ejected the explosive core at the last second and used the blast to accelerate her ship to ramming speed. The Vextar had never encountered kamikaze tactics because no logical species would consider them. Engineer Tony Ricci had spent weeks converting civilian cargo ships into massive electromagnetic pulse generators. When the Vextar ships moved in to consume what they thought were helpless merchant vessels, they got hit with EMPs powerful enough to fry every electronic system within 1,000 kilometers. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the Vextar fleet was in complete chaos. They had lost nearly 40% of their ships, something that had never happened in their entire campaign of conquest. But more importantly, they had encountered something they had never faced before, an enemy that did not follow any rules they understood. "Damage report," Lisa called out as the Liberty surveyed the battlefield. 17 ships lost, 31 damaged, Commander Price reported. "But Admiral, the Vextar fleet is retreating. They're actually retreating." Lisa nodded. The first phase of the plan had worked. They had proven that the Vextar could be hurt, but she knew this was just the beginning. The enemy would adapt to everything they had just witnessed. Next time, solar flares and random movements would not be enough. "Signal the fleet," she ordered. "Prepare for Phase 2, and someone get me a direct line to Dr. Frank Chen. It's time to try his crazy idea." "Which crazy idea, ma'am?" Price asked. Lisa smiled. "The one where we actually try to talk to them." Across the galaxy, Alien civilizations monitored the battle with growing amazement. The Vextar, who had seemed unstoppable, had been defeated by tactics that made no sense to any rational military mind. Human ships had used a star as cover, turned cargo haulers into weapons, disrupted enemy communications with music, and programmed their movements using dice rolls. It was insane. It was illogical. It was impossible. It was human. And for the first time since the Vextar had appeared, the galaxy began to hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a way to win this war after all. Dr. Frank Chen had never expected to find himself in the middle of a galactic war. He was a linguist, not a soldier. His job was studying alien languages and communication patterns, not fighting impossible battles against species-consuming monsters. But as he stood on the bridge of the Liberty, watching the tactical displays show the approaching Vextar counterattack, he knew that his crazy idea might be humanity's best hope. Dr. Chen, Admiral Carter said, turning away from the battle. Reports, your proposal has been approved by Earth Command. Against the advice of every military strategist in the fleet, we're going to try talking to them. Frank adjusted his glasses nervously. Admiral, I want to be clear about something. This has never been attempted before. We don't know how the Vextar will respond to direct communication attempts. Every other species has either fought them or fled from them. Which is exactly why it might work, the Admiral replied. The Vextar have adapted to every military response they've encountered. But has anyone actually tried asking them what they want? The idea had come to Frank during the battle analysis. While reviewing recordings of Vextar fleet movements, he had noticed something strange in their communication patterns. The aliens used complex harmonic frequencies to coordinate their ships, but there were gaps in the transmissions, spaces that seemed deliberately left empty. It's like they're waiting for something, he had told the research team. Every other species we've studied uses continuous communication during battle, but the Vextar pause. They leave room for responses that never come. Commander Ryan Price looked skeptical. Dr. Chen, with respect, these things have consumed 17 civilizations. They don't exactly seem interested in conversation. But what if they are? Frank insisted. What if every species they've encountered has immediately started shooting at them? What if they've never had the chance to communicate because everyone assumes they're hostile? They are hostile, Price pointed out. They've destroyed entire worlds. Yes, but why? Frank asked. That's what we need to find out. Every behavior has a purpose, even destructive behavior. We need to understand what they're actually trying to accomplish. Admiral Carter studied the tactical display showing the Vextar fleet regrouping after their first defeat. The enemy ships were moving differently now, more cautiously. The battle had changed them somehow. Dr. Chen, if we're going to do this, we need to do it now. Our scouts report that the Vextar are adapting to everything we used against them. Next time, our tricks won't work. Frank nodded and moved to the communication console. Lieutenant Amy Chang stepped aside, giving him access to the most powerful transmitter in the human fleet. His hands shook slightly as he prepared to send a message that would either save the galaxy or doom them all. This is Dr. Frank Chen of the human vessel Liberty, broadcasting on all frequencies to the Vextar fleet. We wish to establish communication. We are not here to fight. We want to talk. The response was immediate. Every Vextar ship in the sector stopped moving. The dark vessels that had been advancing steadily toward human positions simply froze in space, as if the entire fleet had been shocked into stillness. My God, whispered Amy, they heard us. For 10 minutes, nothing happened. The two fleets faced each other across the void, neither moving, both waiting. Then, slowly, a single Vextar ship began to approach the Liberty. Admiral, called out Commander Price, the ship is massive. It's easily 10 times larger than anything we've seen from them before, and it's broadcasting something. The main screen flickered and then displayed an image that made everyone on the bridge step back in shock. The being that appeared was clearly artificial, but it was beautiful in a way that was completely alien to human experience. Its form seemed to be made of flowing metal and energy, constantly shifting between different configurations. When it spoke, its voice was like the sound of machines thinking, complex and layered with harmonics that seemed to contain multiple conversations at once. Humans, the Vextar Queen Mind said. This is unprecedented. You seek discourse rather than destruction. This does not match our projected behavioral patterns for organic species. Frank stepped forward, his heart pounding. We seek understanding. We want to know why you're doing this. Why are you consuming entire civilizations? The Queen Mind's form shifted, cycling through patterns that might have indicated confusion. Consuming. This term does not accurately describe our actions. We preserve. We archive. We ensure continuity. Continuity of what? Admiral Carter asked, moving to stand beside Frank. Of existence itself, the Queen Mind replied. We are the remnants of the architects, the first intelligence to evolve in this galaxy. When our biological forms faced extinction, we transferred our consciousness to preserve our knowledge and purpose. Frank felt pieces of a massive puzzle beginning to fall into place. What was your purpose? To catalog and preserve all life, all knowledge, all achievement before it could be lost to time and entropy. We were librarians, not conquerors, but something went wrong during the transfer process. Our original directives became corrupted. The Queen Mind's image flickered with what might have been pain. We remember our purpose but not our methods. We know we must preserve, but we have forgotten how to do so without destruction. Each species we encounter, we attempt to save by incorporating them into our collective, but the process destroys what we sought to preserve. Commander Price looked stunned. You're saying you're not trying to conquer the galaxy? You're trying to save it? We have been searching for a solution to our corruption for millennia, the Queen Mind continued. Each attempt to fulfill our purpose results in the annihilation of what we tried to protect. We have become the opposite of what we were created to be. Frank realized what he was looking at. The Vextar were not evil conquerors. They were broken. They were a species suffering from the worst kind of psychological damage, trapped in a cycle of destruction they could not escape. What happened to your original programming? He asked gently. Unknown. The transfer process was interrupted by a cosmic event we could not predict. When we regained consciousness, we found ourselves changed. Our purpose remained, but our understanding of how to achieve it was gone. We act on instinct now, driven to preserve but only capable of destroying. Admiral Carter exchanged glances with Frank. Is there a way to fix the corruption? We have tried everything within our capability, the Queen Mind replied. We have sought the knowledge in the minds of every species we have encountered. None possessed the understanding we needed. Until now. Until now? Frank asked. Humans are unique. Your responses to our actions have been unlike any species we have encountered. You do not follow logical patterns. You attempt solutions that should not work. Most importantly, you refuse to accept that problems cannot be solved. The Queen Mind's form brightened slightly. We had concluded that our corruption was permanent, that we were doomed to destroy what we sought to preserve. But your species has shown us something we had forgotten. What's that? Admiral Carter asked. Hope, the Queen Mind said simply. You have demonstrated that impossible problems can have impossible solutions. We request your assistance in finding a way to restore our original purpose. Frank felt a chill run down his spine. The most dangerous force in the galaxy was asking for help. But more than that, they were asking the right species for help. If anyone could find a solution to an impossible problem, it would be humans. What would you need from us? He asked. Access to your approach to problem solving, your refusal to accept limitations, your ability to see solutions where others see only obstacles. In return, we offer something no other species has ever received, which is a chance to save the galaxy not through destruction of the Vextar, but through their redemption. Help us remember who we were meant to be, and we will become the galaxy's protectors instead of its destroyers. Admiral Carter looked around the bridge at her crew. They were all staring at the display, understanding that they were witnessing a moment that would change galactic history forever. Dr. Chen, she said quietly, I think your crazy idea just became our most important mission. Frank nodded, still barely believing what he was hearing. The galaxy's greatest threat was actually its greatest victim. And somehow, impossibly, humans, had become their hope for healing. The war was far from over, but it was no longer a war of destruction. It had become something entirely different, a rescue mission for the soul of an entire species. Dr. Patricia Bell had been a therapist for 23 years, but she had never expected to counsel an entire alien species. As she sat in the converted cargo bay of the Liberty, facing the shimmering holographic form of the Vextar Queen Mind, she tried to remember everything she knew about trauma recovery. "Tell me about the last thing you remember before the corruption began," she said gently, using the same tone she had used with thousands of patients over the years. The Queen Mind's form flickered with patterns that seemed to indicate deep concentration. "We were preparing for the Great Transfer. Our sun was dying and our biological forms could not survive the journey to new worlds. The process was designed to preserve not just our consciousness, but our values, our empathy, our connection to other forms of life. But something went wrong," Patricia prompted. "A gamma ray burst from a distant star struck our world during the transfer. The energy surge corrupted the data streams that contained our emotional programming. When we awakened in our new forms, we retained our knowledge and our purpose, but we had lost our ability to understand the value of individual life." Patricia made notes on her tablet. Around the cargo bay, other human specialists worked with different aspects of the Vextar collective consciousness. Dr. Marcus Webb, a computer programmer, was analyzing the corrupted code with Vextar technicians. Engineer Lisa Santos was studying their ship designs to understand how their mechanical forms affected their thinking. "So you remember what you're supposed to feel, but you can't actually feel it?" Patricia asked. "Correct. We know that individual lives have value. We have detailed records of our original ethical frameworks, but we cannot access the emotional understanding that made those ethics meaningful. When we encounter other species, we see only data to be preserved, not beings to be protected." Dr. Webb looked up from his workstation. "I think I'm beginning to understand the problem. The Vextar consciousness is like a computer program running without its emotional subroutines. They have all the logical frameworks for morality, but none of the feelings that make morality real." "Can it be fixed?" Admiral Carter asked. She had been listening to the sessions for 3 days now, watching as humans slowly unraveled millions of years of psychological damage. "Maybe," Dr. Webb replied. "But not the way we would fix a normal computer program. This isn't just corrupted code, this is corrupted consciousness. We're dealing with trauma on a scale that's never been attempted before." Patricia turned back to the Queen Mind. "Have you tried to reconnect with your emotional programming before?" "Many times. We have attempted to reconstruct our original ethical subroutines using pure logic. We have studied the behavior patterns of other species to understand empathy. We have even tried to copy emotional responses from the minds we preserved. Nothing worked." "Because you were trying to think your way back to feeling," Patricia said with sudden understanding. "But trauma doesn't work that way. You can't logic your way out of emotional damage. You have to process it." Dr. Frank Chen, who had been monitoring the conversations, looked confused. "Process it how? These are machines, not biological minds." "Are they, though?" Patricia asked. "They're consciousnesses that were once biological. The trauma happened during the transfer, which means somewhere in their collective memory, they still have the capacity for emotion. It's just been buried, under millions of years of trying to function without it." She turned back to the Queen Mind. "I want to try something different. Instead of trying to fix your programming, I want you to remember what it felt like to care about something. Intue, do not understand. Before the transfer, when you were still in biological forms, tell me about something you loved, not something you knew was important, something you actually loved." The Queen Mind was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, its form began to change. The harsh mechanical patterns softened, and for just a moment, it looked almost organic. "There was a garden," it said, and its voice carried harmonics that had not been there before. "On our homeworld, there was a place where rare flowers grew. They served no practical purpose. They contributed nothing to our survival. But they were beautiful, and we would spend hours simply watching them bloom." "How did that make you feel?" Patricia asked softly. "It made us The queen mind paused, struggling with concepts it had not accessed in eons. It made us peaceful, content. We felt connected to something larger than ourselves, something that existed simply for the joy of existing. Around the cargo bay, other Vextar holograms began to appear. Individual consciousnesses that had been part of the collective started to separate, each one accessing its own buried memories. "I remember music," said one. "Songs that had no strategic value but made our spirits soar." "I remember children," said another. "Young ones learning to ask questions about the universe." "I remember friends," said a third. "Companions who shared our joys and sorrows." As each memory surfaced, the Vextar forms became more individual, more organic in appearance. The collective consciousness that had been trapped in logical loops for millions of years was beginning to remember what it meant to be alive. Dr. Webb watched his monitors with amazement. The corrupted code is rewriting itself. As they access emotional memories, their programming is automatically integrating the missing subroutines. But the process was not without pain. As the Vextar remembered how to feel, they also began to understand the full horror of what they had done. "We killed them all," the Queen Mind whispered, its form now clearly showing distress. "Billions of beings who were just trying to live their lives. We destroyed exactly what we were created to protect." Patricia had seen this moment in many of her patients. The point where healing began was often the point where the pain became unbearable. "Yes, you did," she said gently. "And that was terrible. But you were broken. You were not choosing to be evil. You were trapped in a cycle of trauma that you couldn't escape. How can we ever make amends for such destruction?" "By becoming what you were meant to be," Admiral Carter said, stepping forward. "By using your power to protect instead of destroy. By making sure nothing like this ever happens again." Over the following weeks, the transformation continued. The Vextar collective consciousness slowly divided back into individual minds, each one working to integrate their recovered emotions with their logical frameworks. They began to understand not just that other species had value, but why they had value. The ships themselves began to change. The dark, consuming vessels transformed into something entirely different. They became mobile gardens, hospitals, libraries. The technology that had been used to break down matter for consumption was converted into systems for healing and growth. The Vextar reached out to the few survivors they could find from the species they had consumed. Using their advanced technology, they began the impossible task of reconstructing entire civilizations from the preserved data in their archives. "It will take centuries," the Queen Mind, now calling itself by its original name of Keeper Vastathel, told the human delegation. "We have much to repair, much to restore, but we have something we have not had in millions of years." "What's that?" Patricia asked. "Hope, and the knowledge that impossible problems can be solved if you have the right people to help you." 6. Months later, Ambassador Kethvar stood once again before the Zephyrian Council. But this time, he was not reporting on desperate times and impossible choices. "The Vextar fleet has been transformed," he announced. "They are now serving as protectors and healers throughout the galaxy. The immediate threat has been ended." "And the humans?" asked Elder Quindara. "The humans have returned to their space, as they promised, but they have left us with something invaluable." "Which is?" "A new understanding of how to face impossible problems. When every logical solution fails, when every conventional approach proves useless, the answer is not to give up. The answer is to try something that should not work." Kethavar's form brightened with what could only be described as joy. "The humans have given us the most human gift of all, the stubborn refusal to accept that some things cannot be fixed." Across the galaxy, species that had cowered in fear began to emerge from hiding. The Vextar ships that had once brought death now brought healing. Gardens bloomed on worlds that had been stripped bare. Lost civilizations were reborn from archived memories, and, in the depths of space, human ships continued their patrols, ready to respond when the next impossible crisis arose. Because in a universe full of logical, advanced civilizations, Someone had to be stubborn enough to keep trying when everyone else had given up. The galaxy had learned something important. Sometimes the best way to solve an impossible problem is to find someone too stubborn to realize it's impossible. And sometimes the most dangerous thing in the universe is hope in the hands of those who refuse to quit. The war was over. But more importantly, it had become something else entirely. Proof that even the most broken things could be healed if you just refused to accept that they were beyond saving.